Hey guys, Sean here. Today I'll be finally getting this FireStorm MOSFET installed. And it'll be kind of an installation video and a brief review. If you want more technical details on the MOSFET unit itself, go on to their website, and I'll put the link into the description. I'm going to be putting it in a G&G gearbox, and it's going to be a little bit different than most MOSFET configurations that you see. Usually you see them running out the back with the MOSFET somewhere right out of the buffer tube or in the buffer tube even. And this one, we're actually going to put the MOSFET in the gearbox shell, because it is a small MOSFET that'll keep it out of the way when you're trying to mess with your buffer tube, or if you have a buffer tube battery, it'll keep the unit out of the way. So we'll get started, and this video might be kind of cut up in certain spots, just because I'm not going to go through every little detail of installing a MOSFET. Although this should be a decent tutorial, but you guys, if you don't know how to solder, basically I'm not going to teach you how to solder. If you don't know how to solder, look that up first, then come back. But alright, start off. Oops. I took out all of the screws except for one out of the gearbox shell. Just to kind of speed up the video, because this is already going to be a pretty long video. I want to take pretty much everything out of the gearbox and set it aside. Alright, remove the trolley spring, the trigger, going to remove the contact unit itself, set the trolley aside. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to desolder these. Basically just touch your soldering iron to where they're located and pull. It'll melt the solder and pull them right off. So I'll be right back. Alright, as you can see, I desoldered the wires. Just going to toss those to the side. Not going to need those junky things anymore. And we're going to zoom in a little bit. Gonna pull the MOSFET out of its packaging. Set that to the side. Alright. Take a look at the MOSFET. Comes with an extra signal wire. Okay, and then it has out one side, it has, oh, there's your positive wire, also not connected to the MOSFET. One side it has a to battery wire. Through the other side, motor and another signal wire. I really like the fact that that FireStorm labeled all of their wires. So for first time MOSFET installers, that's going to help a lot if it's your first time installing. So yeah. Also, normally you would want about this much hanging out of your buffer tube. So your buffer tube, the rear of it, would start about here. And then this length would go into your gearbox. Because obviously if this MOSFET is going to be sitting right in here, this is obviously not enough length of wire. So what we're going to do is take the remaining amount of this wire and put a bullet connector on the back of this. So you're going to want to start out just putting the MOSFET where you want it, which is right about here. Pretty simple. Actually, I like to run my signal wire underneath my motor wires because those end up going across where the pinion will meet it. Well, actually you don't want it to meet it. You want it to go under the pinion. As you can see. And then we actually probably won't need this other signal wire because we're going to use the remainder of this signal wire as the second signal. So then you'll have a positive, and that's going to run by the MOSFET or under it, possibly, if we can do that. And we're also actually going to run the positive under the negative, so I'll reroute that real quick. Alright guys, I'm back. As you can see, I cut the excess signal wire. Here it is laying over here. And I cut the excess off the bottom of the motor wires. Make sure you don't cut them too short, so they're also sitting here. And those are what if they're long enough, I'll use them to extend the wiring out the back to the buffer tube, or to the crane stock, whatever. Just to show you how I have this set up, this will focus, there we go. I have the MOSFET sitting in between this post of metal in this screw hole. As you can see, the negative wire turns straight back out this back slot where the wiring goes. I have the positive wire running behind the MOSFET unit. And I have all these wires crammed in here. These two little nicks are just from struggling with it. I'll have to put some sort of sealant over those just to make sure I don't get any shorts. As you can see, I have the wires ran through here. So pretty simple setup. You also want to make sure that you don't have the MOSFET unit bending over in front of the hole, because that's where your rear receiver pin goes through the gearbox. So just make sure it's clear of that. Also make sure everything's clear of the spur gear. You don't want the MOSFET hanging down here because the spur gear could chew it up. And lastly, you don't want anything in the way of the anti-reversal latch hole, because obviously your anti-reversal latch is going to go in there and turn. So, now that we got that all set up, one more thing you're going to want to note is if you have it set up this way where only the signal wires go forward, it's going to be totally fine. But you're going to, for the back here, most stock gearboxes come with these stupid little pegs that are made to press the thin wiring down and hold it in place. Well, that's fine for thin wiring, so I leave them up front to hold the signal wires, but you're going to want to cut them off the back, or else they will poke into your main wires and destroy them. You could get a short in your system and destroy the MOSFET or your motor. So you want to cut these off, make sure they're smooth. So yeah. Alright, next two steps. First will be what you're going to want to do. I might have already mentioned this, but I don't think I did. Anyway, just to ensure that the MOSFET unit is going to stay in its spot, you're going to want to take a drop, a dab of super glue. This is the kind that I use. And you're going to want to dab the super glue right about here where it meets the gearbox, so it's not going anywhere. It'll wiggle a little bit, that's because the top obviously isn't held down by any glue, and you wouldn't want it to, but the bottom is glued down to the gearbox shell, so it's probably not going to go anywhere. Next thing you're going to do is, you may have noticed that I cut a little section of coating. I didn't cut it all the way around, as you can see, just one side of the coating off of here. And that's because now I'm going to be splicing my positive wire for a positive signal wire. Most people will run the positive signal all the way to the positive battery connector just alongside the main positive wire, or they'll splice it, back here somewhere or up along the line farther, or like I said, they won't splice it at all and they'll just connect it to the battery connector. But since this is focused on saving as much space as we possibly can, I don't want to splice it anywhere back here and run it through here because we're running out of room up here, and I don't want another wire crossing the pinion area. So I'm going to splice it right here and run it through here alongside the other one. So I cut part of the coating off. I already tinned it with some solder. I already tinned this with some solder. So now I'm just going to solder those two together. So I'm going to solder this signal wire to the positive splice and cover it with some heat shrink, and we'll see how it goes. Alright, it's spliced in right there. I'm going to cover it with some heat shrink, and I will be right back. Alright, as you can see, I have it spliced in together. What we're going to do now is do the heat shrink. You don't want to touch the flame to it. You just want the flame to heat it up, unless you really want to burn your heat shrink. Just like that. It's going to sit down in there, like so. Around that corner. And these will go up here. And as you can see, I cut these to length that they need to be to connect to the contacts. And I also put solder on the ends just to speed it up a bit. So this one, I'm going to connect these to the, I'm going to solder them to the tabs on the contacts, and put some heat shrink over those as well. So before you go and solder them, you're going to want to slip some heat shrink over each one. Alright, I'll solder those and I'll be right back. Alright, I have the wires soldered onto their spots on the contact. This one I didn't get the heat shrink all the way over it, just because it goes down. But it's alright. Got that one all good. You just don't want any metal touching these or anything like that, and it's completely clear of it. That's the whole point of putting the heat shrink over these, is just to make sure nothing else touches them, and just keep it clean. Anyway, so they're all set up. You want to make sure they're clear of this moving. You don't want them sticking up and getting caught on this. You want to also make sure they are clear of your trigger movement. There. And they are. And lastly, you want to make sure that it is clear of this hole, because that is where your fake trigger pin, the body pin, will go through. Not the main rear or front receiver pin, but that skinny body pin goes right through that hole. So if they're up and in the way of that, then you could tear your wires, and obviously you wouldn't want that. But after this point, the MOSFET install is pretty much complete. I'm going to extend the wires out, and I'm going to make them quick disconnects right here with 2mm bullet connectors, because 2mm bullet connectors can handle plenty of amps, much more than spade connectors, which is what this wiring system originally used, was these crappy spades. And I mean, if these are good enough to hold some electricity, the 2mm bullets are definitely. And I've used 2mm bullets for plenty of quick disconnects. I've never had them heat up or cause any resistance whatsoever, so definitely good. And they're much more low profile than the 3.5mm bullets. So yeah, this will be quick disconnect right here, and motor connectors will go down here. So other than that, your MOSFET system is installed. Just gotta extend the wires out, and then wire the Dean's connector on, and then put your motor connectors on. Now, as you can see, I have the quick disconnects 2mm bullets soldered on and heat shrinked over. I see a lot of guys that, I mean, not a lot, but a few guys that, I'm not trying to call anybody out, but I see a few guys that don't even heat shrink over their bullet connectors, whether they be 2 or 3.5 mil bullets. I'm just like, are you really a tech? Like, you should always cover. I'm not trying to hate on anyone, just little tip. You should always cover any exposed metal that has anything to do with electricity. And yeah, that's about it. Anyway, as you can see, I soldered those on, heat shrinked them, and also soldered the Dean's connector on, heat shrinked. And with these, just pull them out. If you take your gearbox out and you don't want all these wires flopping around, you just want it short and simple to work with while you're, moving your gearbox around, working on it, nice and short. Or if you're working with your buffer tube and trying to take that off, you can just give the wires a little tug, they'll come right out. Just when you're putting in your battery or taking it out, make sure you don't tug on the wires too hard, or these will come disconnected and you'll have to take off your buffer tube to reconnect them. And as you can see, I have male 2 mil bullets on the side that's coming from the battery, and on the side that goes to the gearbox I have female 2mm bullets. And that's pretty simple because, obviously this is negative because it's black, obviously this is positive wire because it's red, so you're never gonna mix them up. You match the colors of the wires together. So the positive will plug in with the positive, the negative will plug in with the negative, and it's as simple as that. But just a little tip for you guys that might be using weird colored wires. I know a lot of MOSFETs don't come with black and red, they come with weird colored wires, and in fact the D6 NanoFET, great MOSFET, but it comes with all black wires. The positive main wire is black, the negative main wire is black, even the signal wires are all black. Every wire on it is black. Guess what color the MOSFET is? Black. So it might be kind of hard to tell which one you need to plug in. And that's something you do not want to mix up. So I have this little tip for you guys. This is how I have mine set up. Be the females on one side and the males on the other. Now if you have all the same color wiring, you don't want to get it mixed up, what you can do is you can flip-flop them like this. So you have a male here plugging into a female over here, and a male over here plugging into the female over here. So if you attempted to accidentally plug your, let's just say this is negative, let's say this is your negative line, this is your positive line. If you tried to plug in your negative to a positive, it wouldn't work. Vice versa, tried to plug your negative into the positive, it wouldn't work. So they can only plug in that one way. So that's just a tip for you guys if you ever use wiring that's all one color. But anyway, that is the installation of the FireStorm MOSFET. I'll put a link in the description. This is an excellent MOSFET. I could not recommend it more. It's very cost effective at only 10 euros. And yes, you can order it and they will ship it to the United States for pretty cheap. The shipping's cheap, and it'll get to you in about a week, so you don't have to worry about that super slow international shipping. It's very fast for international. Only 1 week. And 10 euros is about 15 US dollars. That's extremely cost effective. and this is a very well built MOSFET. I know the guys that build them, very great techs, and they know exactly what they're doing. It's a very durable MOSFET, and it's very small. You can put it anywhere you want. It's going to fit in any small space. So pretty much you can put it in any build. As long as there's some small room somewhere, it will fit. So yeah, highly, highly, highly recommend it. And I'll put a link in the description. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope it was informative and helpful. Alright, have a good day, guys.